Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dr. Doctor, the show where no topic is too hot or too cold. Whether it's politics, religion, relationships, entertainment, or everyday life, you will be hearing from the experts. This show is not for the faint of heart or the faint of mind. But if you want to be inspired, you have come to the right place. And now, prepare to be enlightened as we introduce the host of Dr. Doctor, Dr. Peter Tassi, and his close advisor, Dr. Fooch.
Greetings to everybody out there. Thanks for joining us again today. Unfortunately, Dr. Fooch isn't with us, but I want to talk to you about a very popular and topic that really is on everybody's mind. I want to talk to you today about happiness. Happiness is something that we all search for. Human beings have been searching for happiness since the beginning of time. You know, we always wish people happiness. You ask people what they want most out of life. They say, I want to be happy. This is a common universal quest for all of humanity. And sometimes we forget that we are the authors of our own life and our own happiness. Too often we think that happiness is dependent on something external to us, something that happens outside of us that impacts our life. But this is not the case. What happens to us externally, what happens to us outside of us, whether it's economical or physical, things like that we are subject to these conditions, do not really create happiness or impede happiness. Happiness is something that comes from within. You've all heard that before. We've been hearing that for really thousands of years, that happiness is something that comes from within. But no matter how many times we hear it, we just can't seem to accept it. We always tend to think that happiness comes from something outside of us. If I had more money, if I had better health, if my kids were different, if my spouse was different, if I had a better job, if I lived in a nicer house, it's all an illusion. And that's the point of my talk today. It's all an illusion. Happiness truly does come from within. All the great thinkers in history, all the great religious leaders in history, they have it right. They're not wrong. They're right. Happiness does come from within. It's amazing how many people I've met in my life who decide on misery. They actually think that they will find happiness in negativity, in criticism, in bitterness, in anger. And in fact, in some people, it becomes so much a part of their being, the misery. It becomes so much a part of their life. And of course, they blame everything outside of themselves. You know, I don't have enough money. My health is failing. I can't find a partner that I can find compatibility and friendship with. My job stinks, whatever it is. These people, no matter what the situation, even if you gave them the perfect partner, even if you gave them all the money they wanted, the house they wanted, the career they wanted, they would still be unhappy and manage to find misery in their life. And it's almost as if we become happy in the misery. It becomes something we're so used to, so comfortable with, so much a part of who we are because of our attitude, whether that attitude's caused by upbringing or whatever. We're not going to discuss that today. But it becomes so much a part of who they are that they can't imagine being happy outside of the misery that they're in. And so they constantly choose misery. It's amazing how when you look at Christian scriptures, for example, you will often see throughout the Bible, and I can think of some cases with Jesus, that he is challenging people and saying, are you ready to be cured? It's not in those words, but when you read the scriptures, you see this. He challenges people, before I heal you, before I cure you, do you have the courage to get up and walk? Are you ready to be cured? Are you ready to be healed? Because Jesus knows that some people who lay on that mat all their life on the ground and beg for pennies actually associate that life with happiness. They actually become so comfortable in their handicap or their misery or their unhappiness that it actually takes great, great effort for them to say, you know what, I have had enough, and I do have the courage to get up. I do have the courage to change my life. But it all comes from within. Many people, as you know, you read it in all the books. I'm not saying anything new here. They, no matter how much they're told this, and how much they read about it, they still think that happiness is found in the world, in lust, in money, power, prestige, status. And we know that these things provide distractions, but they do not provide happiness. In between the distractions, we are unhappy, only driven to find the next distraction. So if for example, I get happiness from being affirmed at work from my boss, I will go throughout my day from one moment to the next seeking that affirmation from my boss or my colleagues, whatever brings me that moment of happiness. If I get happiness from living a life of lust, I will go from one woman to the next woman to the next woman. And in those moments of being affirmed at work or having a sexual relationship or making another $1,000 or whatever it is, in those moments we are happy, I believe, because we've convinced ourselves that this is what brings us happiness. So for that brief moment, which I would rather call distractions, we believe that we are happy, and some would argue that we are actually happy. But the problem is these distractions never last. Some of them last an hour, some of them last 10 minutes. It's like buying a new house. Oh, I want a new house. I want a big house. So I buy a 3,000 square foot house. It's beautiful. I'm coming out of an 800 square foot house. Talk to all these people who have done this, myself included. When you move into the beautiful new house, you're happy, it's exciting, it's beautiful, you have more room to put things, it's just an overwhelming feeling. But it doesn't last long. For some people it might last a week. For some people it might last 4 months. But eventually what happens is you sit back and you say to yourself, you know what? The novelty's worn off. I've had it with this house. Like, this house don't mean nothing to me. And then people come to the realization, I don't want to be house poor. So they sell the house. So really that home didn't bring happiness. It only brought a distraction. And since the beginning of time, we have seen people talk about this. Some people view happiness as being, my search for happiness is a selfish one. But when you look at the great thinkers like St. Augustine, he said that everyone deserves to be happy. Aristotle, the great Greek philosopher, along with Plato and Socrates 2,500 years ago, they talked about we actually have an obligation to ourselves to find happiness. That it's actually a moral responsibility for us to be happy. to find happiness, achieve happiness. Because when we do, they would argue that we become the person we truly are, beings who are to be happy. Jesus says the same. The great religious leaders all say the same. Also, when we find happiness, we are a good force in the universe for others. We exude positive energy. We exude happiness. And you know, when you meet a person who's content and at peace and happy, there's an aura there. You sense it right away. And everybody wants to be around them. People love their company. So we're a positive influence in the world. So we have a moral obligation and a theological, spiritual obligation to find happiness. Let's look at all the major world religions and all the great teachers and prophets throughout history. Hinduism, the world's oldest existing religion, talks about the 4 wants of man. And the ultimate want, which man realizes later in life, gee, maybe I didn't want the house, the money, the career. What I really want is to achieve liberation, a state of mukti, they call it. I want to be free of selfish desires, free of ego, and achieve true freedom, because here I will find true happiness. Buddhism talks about the 4 noble truths, and that our unhappiness and suffering is always caused by selfish desires. So the more we desire, the more unhappy we will be. And it's our goal in life to overcome suffering. Is that selfish? No. It's to overcome suffering for the sake of finding freedom and peace and happiness. And they offer it in the 4th noble truth called the Eightfold Path, where they talk about right speech, right action, right livelihood, right mindfulness, so on and so forth. To adopt all these things and to work hard, just as the Hindus talk about, working hard to achieve happiness. It's not easy. Taoism talks about achieving that mystical union with the Tao inside. Just like Buddhism would call it the Bodhi nature inside. Hinduism would call it the Brahma nature inside. All of these religions hint at the idea that really deep down inside there's a divine element in us. And what we have to do, like Islam says, with its 5 pillars, abandon our ego and achieve oneness with Allah. In Christianity, you see where Jesus offers humanity the opportunity for happiness in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5-7. So here he gives basically the formula. You know, happy are those who are poor in spirit. They say blessed when you read the scriptures. He's referring to happiness here. Happy are those who are peacemakers. Happy are those who have suffered for my sake. So there's a list of beatitudes there. 8 beatitudes that are really the formula for happiness. And then he goes on, Jesus' teachings, and teaches us in the Sermon on the Mount, in those chapters that we can find in Matthew, that how one can find happiness. And basically, it's the same formula. First of all, happiness comes from within. Happiness comes from becoming one with the divine within. And that divine is happiness. And that's why we have a moral obligation to achieve that happiness. So my point here is that when you think about it, everything is about achieving happiness. But if we don't choose the right path, if we choose to be greedy, materialistic, lustful, live in basically just a physical world, we destroy ourselves. And we destroy the world. When we choose the right path, we become builders of families and communities and the world. And we become people who others love, people who others want to be with, because you exude this peaceful, trustworthy, aura about you. So let me ask you, do you think you are ready to find happiness? And I ask you that question because happiness is hard to find. If it was easy, everybody would be happy. It's very simple. But it's not easy. It's very, very difficult. I once asked a man who I believe was what you would call Christ-like nature, or if you want to talk in terms of Buddhism, he had the Bodhi nature. Hinduism, he achieved mukti, total liberation. Probably, I've met many people in my life. I was gifted to have met many people in my life who are close to that. This man definitely achieved it. And I would often ask him about the meaning of suffering and the meaning of life and so on and so forth. And he had very few words, but very profound. And I asked him, how did you achieve your state? I didn't say, how did you achieve happiness? Because he may not have been willing to answer that. Because I don't think he liked others to think, oh, here's a guy that's some kind of guru that achieved happiness. So he says, how did you achieve your state of mind, your capacity to love, forgive, so on and so forth? And he answered me in 2 words: hard work. Hard work. It's not easy. It's not easy to make the kinds of sacrifices you have to make in everyday life, to peel back the onion, to get rid of all the layers of ego, the feelings of jealousy, resentment, bitterness, anger, and all these things that distract us from finding true happiness. That's not easy. Just like it's not easy for the man to get up from the mat who's been laying there for decades, begging for money and being miserable. So it's hard work. But if you're ready, if you think you're ready for the hard work, and you're willing to put in the effort, then let's proceed. And I want to offer you today just a very simple kind of formula that I think works if you're willing to work at it. And I believe that there is no one formula. There's many formulas, just like there's many religions that offer people a path to happiness. There's many books written about how to achieve happiness. And, we go all the way back to the Greek philosophers we mentioned before. Some will talk about the virtuous life, living the ethical or moral life will bring you happiness. Others talk about the spiritual life. I think there's many formulas. I offer you a formula today, but it may not be suitable to you. Hopefully, it is of some help to you. It does reflect what a lot of the great thinkers say. But I love the teachings of the Dalai Lama, and I've read his work on happiness. And for him, it's very simple. And there's not steps like there are here that I'm going to present to you. It's very simple. Live a completely and totally compassionate life. Be a complete, total, loving being, and you'll be happy. So anyway, let's start here. First of all, I think the first challenge, and like I say, this trip is not an easy pilgrimage that you're going to take, but let's go through it quickly and give time to reflect on it, and maybe it's something you may want to embark on. First of all, we have to rid ourselves of ego. This is very, very difficult. To be self-important, to be a somebody. And this is difficult because from childhood we're raised to be a somebody. And that somebody is often measured by not who we are, but what we do. Not what's within us, but what's outside of us. How much money we have, what kind of life we live. We have to rid ourselves of ego. And that doesn't mean getting rid of the self. The paradox there is that by getting rid of ego, this feeling of self-importance and always trying to prove to the world that you are important, by getting rid of this selfish, self-centered view of things, we actually become free of ourselves. And by becoming free of ourselves, we can truly become who we are created to be. Secondly, we have to be able to free ourselves from the past in this process of getting rid of our ego. We're raised from childhood by parents and society, cultures, and things that teach us certain things, and some things we're taught were wrong. If you were raised by parents who always said to you, you don't measure up, you're not doing good enough, well, we were raised by a lie. I don't want to call people raised in this environment their parents liars, because they probably meant the best, and that's how they knew how to love. But we were raised by a lie. So, but if we believe that lie, that we don't measure up, we're not good enough, we're not proving ourselves, we go through our life just from one distraction to another, trying to prove ourselves and accumulate things that have nothing to do with finding happiness. So we have to free ourselves from everything in our past, almost like it's a vacuum. We don't want to get rid of good things and the good part of us, but all those things that distract us from finding true happiness. We have to be willing, number 3, to exchange comfort for suffering. And we will reserve the topic of suffering for some other day, because it's a very complicated theological topic that humans have wrestled with since the beginning of time as well. But basically, we have to be willing to suffer. We have to learn to embrace suffering. We have to have an attitude that suffering is our friend, because from this suffering forges greatness. So what we do now is we don't go through life looking for the distractions, looking for the distractions and looking for those things that will escape suffering and leading us often into a life of misery. Number 4, we have to abandon fear. It's an amazing thing how humans are willing to cross the Sahara Desert. They're willing to jump out of airplanes with a parachute. They'll climb the highest mountains. It's astounding what some humans will do. And this, of course, exemplifies great courage. But we're not willing to abandon our old self and seek and begin the pilgrimage to discover our new self. That is the greatest challenge of all. That requires the greatest amount of courage. And so we have to abandon fear. And finally, on this pilgrimage, as we walk it, we cannot give in to social pressures. We're constantly, this is why a lot of religions say, even if you reach a great level of enlightenment, you cannot give up on your meditation every day. You cannot give up on your prayer life every day, because we have to constantly feed ourselves. Because as humans, we can fall back into that old lifestyle of moments of distraction, of believing happiness is found in other things other than where it is truly found. So if we could do these 5 things, we are now ready to embark on making 3 promises to ourselves. And through making and living these 3 promises, we, I believe, have a good chance at finding happiness. The first promise is what we call reception. So now we are emptying ourselves of our ego, and we are willing to receive revelations. Every day life presents us with wonderful opportunities to learn. It could be while you're walking in the park, it could be while you're in the job, it could be while you're reading a book. They come all day, every day. These beautiful revelations come to us. When a child speaks to us, when our spouse says something to us, when we listen to our children, beautiful revelations. But these are often viewed as just clutter and mutter. And, that beautiful tree. I've seen a million beautiful trees. There's no regard for that. But we have to change our attitude. And we have to look at life as nothing but a series of beautiful revelations coming in our marriage, coming in our relationships, our friendships, a job. It's all very enlightening. They can lead to great enlightenment. So what we want to do is we want to be filled with these revelations. And these revelations reveal to us the true nature of the universe. Whether it's in our relationships, our job, in nature, in God, whatever, we are being told every day, look at it this way, look at it that way, look at this beautiful revelation, look at this truth that I'm revealing to you, this knowledge of truth, this kernel of truth. And you receive these beautiful revelations that life presents to you every day in the form of truths. But if you haven't emptied yourself of all the preconceptions, the ego, you'll not be filled with truths. There's a wall there, because some truths are painful. Some truths are not that easy to receive. We may come to a point in a day where somebody says something to us, or something happens, or we just come to the self-realization, oh geez, I got a lot of hate in my heart for that person, or oh man, I can't get rid of the past, the bitterness I have. And what do? We immediately discard that thought. We get rid of it immediately. That we are bitter over our past or something, or we are a victim in life. Everything that happens is because life doesn't love us. We are a victim. And what we have to do is cognitively and spiritually not allow the negative to overtake us, and cognitively and spiritually accept these truths into our heart and say, you know what? Yeah, maybe I am selfish. Maybe I don't listen enough. Maybe I'm not forgiving enough. Maybe I'm too resentful. Maybe I have too much of a victim attitude. And it's beautiful. Then we're ready to change the way we are. Realization from the reception of revelations is the first step. All these realizations. And so we move to the second step, which is realization. We come to the realization of many, many truths. But the one truth that we will discover in all of this journey and through all these revelations is who we truly are in our inner core. Who we are in our inner core are beings of love. All the religions call us to our inner core to be who we truly are, which is a being of love. To be a being who accepts love and gives love. Everything is about love. And this brings us back to the Dalai Lama. Is basically what he says. The only ingredient you need for happiness. Hard to believe, though, when we go through life and we realize these things, that all these revelations, that to accept them and change the way we are because of them. And especially hard to believe is this realization that, you know what, I am a being of love. I'm worthy of love, and I am capable of giving great love. This is something that we struggle with, and we struggle with the idea that this basically is the whole center of my life, to be a being of love. And we're not talking here, without getting into details, about being a doormat for people or having people abuse us. That's not loving yourself and loving the world. Not being stern with people. You need to be stern with your children, to discipline, so on and so forth. This is things you have to do if you are a person of love. So don't get the idea that being a person of love is this mushy person that goes through life and just everybody abuses them and takes advantage of them. It's a false sense of love for self and the world, because you're not helping yourself and the world, and you're not going to find that happiness. But basically, that we are a person of love. We were created to give love and receive love. We were created to be a person for others, as Bonhoeffer says, a man for others. This is the new life we are called to. This is the new life we discover. And it's a painful life in some regards, because it's a life of constantly maintaining that state of enlightenment, which takes a lot of work. And it's a life that, because you're a person of great love and a person of receiving great love, you will probably suffer a lot more. But the paradox is, once again, and as I said, we'll talk about suffering at a later time, the paradox there is that is where, in the depth of that love and being a person of love and suffering because of it, right in the heart of that suffering is where we find true happiness. So we receive these revelations. We come to the realization of our true nature and that we're called to be people of love and give love and receive love. And finally, stage 3, this results in us reforming our lives. We change our entire life because of it. And not just outwardly in terms of what we do, but inwardly in terms of our own sense of peace, our state of mind, our spiritual state. We change. And we become this new person. And without going into great detail, this new person, who is this new person? People will ask me, what kind of person are they? Well, this is hard to describe, because, if I recommend that you turn to the scriptures, Christian scriptures, and you see this kind of new person that Jesus calls us to be, and how we would exemplify that life. I encourage you to turn to the scriptures in the other world religions, Buddhism and Hinduism, which talk about this new person who has found happiness, found spiritual enlightenment, and see the kind of life they live. I think your own common sense tells you that if you've truly achieved happiness, first of all, this new person is not entangled in anything. You're not entangled in the money you make or the money you have. You're not entangled into physical pleasures, a slave to these. You're not a slave to your job, to power, to prestige, to status. You're not a slave of anything. You are free in this beautiful state of happiness. And I think the best way to describe it in a more practical, or try to articulate the kind of life we live, I think there's certain characteristics, and I want to list a few of them here that are the most critical ones, and I will do it quickly, that will show on the outside what you are on the inside. So I think the best way to describe it is by using the virtues. The virtues describe the kind of person you have become, and how you live your life, and how you view the world, and your state of peace and true freedom by looking at these great virtues that become so much a part of who you are. First of all, humility, one of the greatest of all virtues, and the first of all virtues, because without humility you can't have other virtues. So you become a person who is humble, a good listener, open to the world, and never egocentric and self-centered, and everything evolves around you. We talked about that. You become a person of great gratitude. Not just gratitude for things that you've lost, like a lot of us are. We lose a parent, and then we go, oh man, I realize how great parents I had. Or we lose our job. Oh, I realize how much I really love my job. No. We are a person of gratitude. We are grateful for all things at all times. And we are even grateful for suffering. Wisdom. This is a great virtue that we acquire when we become this new person of love. Making good decisions, for exercising love and how we live our life. We become a person of empathy. Not pretend empathy, not like we pretend that we care about something or someone and going through the motions and so on and so forth. No, we actually see ourselves interconnected in the world. We actually see others as our brother and sisters. We actually see the world as a human family. And so we become one with the world, truly empathetic. We exercise the virtue of forgiveness. We forgive. We forgive even those who've hurt us the most. I hear people talk about things that happened to them 20, 30 years ago. They still haven't forgiven. Whether it's a spouse they divorced, whether it's some bandit that took thief that took them for their money or whatever. They're still talking. There is no forgiveness in their heart. Well, not for the person who has achieved happiness. They have found forgiveness and peace. There is in this new person a great heart of charity and generosity. They're not tied to anything, so they're not afraid to share themselves with the world. They're not afraid to share their wealth with the world. And this doesn't, like we said before, this doesn't mean you give up everything, you hand out all your money and you have nothing and you let people take advantage of you. No, we're not talking about that. And I think you know that by now. But we're talking about the person of charity is the person who can give everything of themselves in love to the world because they're not tied to anything. They're free of all things. In this person, you will see a great state of peacefulness, calmness. They don't make crazy decisions. They're prudent, another great virtue, about everything they do, because they think with calmness and peacefulness. Their minds aren't cluttered. And they have a sense of peace about them. And finally, the virtue of integrity. These people who find true happiness, they do not compromise their integrity. Because there's no need to, because there's nothing the world can offer them that would allow them to compromise their integrity, because they're not attached to anything in the world. You know, most people, when they compromise their integrity, it's because they want something. They desire something, usually something they shouldn't have, but they desire something, and to have it, they will compromise their own integrity. But if you don't desire, because you are truly happy, and you are free of your ego, and free of being enslaved by anything in the world, you will never, ever compromise your integrity. Well, this is a quick overview of this three-step process: revelation, realization, and reformation. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want a book that explains this in more detail, there is a book on Amazon called My Three Promises, Your Path to Happiness. So thanks for joining us today. And if you'd like to write us about a topic you'd like to see covered or anything you'd like to discuss on the show, you can write us at drdoctorpodcast@yahoo.com. That's drdrpodcast@yahoo.com. Also, you can write us at that email to get a digital copy of the book, The History of Time from the Big Bang to the Present. Write us at the same email. That book is free. At the end of the book, it presents you with a challenge. And that challenge, if you win that contest, you can win $50. Well, thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate you listening, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you.